Testing, 1, 2, 3. Check. 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 1, 2. Check. 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 1, 2. 1, 2.
We'll get started in a minute. We just all have to get signed into our fabulous system here. Well, welcome everyone to the Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting, the little committee that keeps on ticking. Last of before the break and first to come back. We have quite a few items on the agenda today, so we're going to get started. Any declarations of interest? None? We have confirmation of minutes from the 16th agenda meeting of June 26th. Anybody have anything to change there, or is that carried? Carried, thank you. Communications, we have communications from the Ottawa Architectural Conservation Awards and also the Heritage Ottawa newsletter from July 2014. And we really, for those of you in the audience, the Ottawa Architectural Conservation Awards, we really hope that you'll help us in getting the word out everywhere, to all the everywheres that you are connected to. It's scheduled for February, and we're hopeful of having it in a very exciting location that we've talked about. Is that confirmed yet? To be determined, but would be really cool if it is. Okay. So the first item is application for demolition and new construction at 160 Manor Avenue. We don't have anyone to speak against that, but we do have the architect, Mr. Hoban, in the audience, and we were going to, and you want to speak. So hang on, because I don't really want. Okay, just speaking briefly. Speak now, then.
Obviously, we're in favor of the report. There's just one item, and that is that the limitation on the approval is for 2 years. My client, young family, and look at this as a longer phase project and would appreciate that extension being given for 5 years, not 2 years. Those are my only comments.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions on that? I have concerns about it. Does staff have any comments on it?
I think our main comment would be we normally include the 2-year expiry date to ensure the projects are completed in a timely fashion and according to the approved plans, but also within the sort of policy framework that is in place at the time. As you know, we are working on an update to the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District plan that we would anticipate will be coming forward early in 2015. So pushing it 5 years down the road, I think, is somewhat concerning for us, but I don't think, I think if the committee wanted to go 3 years, that might be okay, but generally for residential projects like this, we use a 2-year expiry date. It's only for bigger projects that we, high-rise type things, that we would put a longer expiry date.
So maybe what we could do is, we do this with non-conforming uses in other areas. I'm thinking about so if we have 2 years right now, is there anything that would prohibit us, Mr. Mark, from coming back in the 2 years, and what would be involved with doing that to ask for an extension if they needed it?
Madam Chair, regretfully, once the decision is made, the decision of the committee and then of the subcommittee and then of council at the end is at an end. So if the timeline is going to be, if a longer timeline is going to be given, now is the time that decision has to be made.
Okay, so I'm concerned about it being precedent-setting and having more people asking for it. Also, the maintenance of the property over that length of time. I mean, that shouldn't be an issue, but let's bring it back to Vice Chair Podolsky.
Just a question to Mr. Mark. Is it possible that the applicant, before the 2 years is elapsed, can just come back to the committee and request, another 2 years?
That's what I did ask him, and he said no.
If that's what you asked, Madam Chair, I misunderstood the question. If it was a new application, of course, there could be a new approval, yes.
But my question is, with the same application, could the applicant just come back and ask for it to be renewed another 2 years? That's the question.
And what would the financial implication be, and would it have to be a whole new process? And then Vice Chair Podolsky, if you could bring your mic lower to Mr. Mark?
Madam Chair, I don't recall that there's a fee for heritage applications now. So the technical answer is yes, it would be a whole new process, but it certainly could be an abbreviated process, Madam Chair.
Okay. So I'm looking, does anyone have anything else to say? Are you... Well, actually, he wants 5. Can you turn your mic on, please?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just saying maybe if Ms. Collins is okay with 3 years, maybe we could amend it to go for 3 and then go through that process if it has to, a reapplication in 3 years.
Yeah, well, what we don't want to see is have a process that where we've given approval and then in 3 years to come back for another 2 years and then in 2 years to come back for another 3 years, et cetera. And I know that that's not what you're thinking of that might happen now, but I think that given the fact that they could come back before the end of the 2 years and reapply for an extension, that's another way to look at it. I'm going to leave it up to anyone who wants to make a motion or a comment on that.
Well, yeah, I'd be happy to put a motion in to change it to 3 because I know that is sort of tight, the 2 years for a lot of building projects. So.
Okay, so anyone on, that's your motion? Mm-hmm. Okay, so Member Quinn or Vice Chair Podolsky, do you have any comments on that, or are you, yes, Member Quinn? Okay.
Yeah, this is just another question to Leslie, and that is, by adding, this is creating a precedent, I believe. Does this compromise the Heritage Conservation District plan for Rockcliffe, or does it affect any other of the policies or procedures that the Heritage staff are working on? Does this compromise it?
I'm not sure that it compromises the Heritage Conservation District plan. I wouldn't want to suppose whether or not we would recommend approval of this application under a different framework, which will be in place, you know, before this 3 years is up. But there is no requirement under the Heritage Act to have an expiry date. It is a practice of the Heritage section to include an expiry date to ensure that projects are completed in a timely fashion. We've had some issues in the past with projects that have the policy has really changed, and we would have liked to have another stab at it, sort of thing, where they had an approval from 15 years ago and come ahead and build it at that time. So I don't think it would compromise the new Heritage District plan that's coming forward, but I do think that there is, you know, a reasonable amount of time, and the project doesn't have to be completed in 2 years. They have to obtain a building permit within 2 years. So.
Member Quinn?
I think I could support the extension to 3 years.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councillor Hobbs that the let's see, that number 3 issue the heritage permit with a 3-year expiry date from the date of issuance be moved. On the motion, carried. I'm going to dissent. And so on the application as amended, carried. Okay, so we're done.
One point of clarification.
No, I'll tell you what happened. So now you have 3 years.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify the comment, apply for a building permit in 3 years, or secure a building permit in 3 years?
Generally, the rule is apply for a building permit in 3 years.
Okay? And also, as you've heard, it isn't in any way a problem, I guess, for you to reapply at the end of the 3 years. And we've heard that from our legal. Okay? Thank you.
I won't waste any more of your time.
Thanks very much, Mr. Hillman. You never do. Why does it smell like gasoline in here? Like there's a real smell, and I'm very sensitive to it. I was gassed badly about 20 years ago. Can we get that checked out, please? Because there's... Okay. So that was not the way that we usually do our layout of our plan. So let's go back to the normal plan. Application, this is number 2, application for demolition and new construction at 50 Willingdon Road. We have no speakers. We have no speakers for this one. Does anyone on committee have anything to that they want to say or a question? No? Is it carried? Thank you. So item number 3, the application to alter 455 Green Avenue. We're going to hold that because this is an interesting one that has been reapplied, and staff have a presentation. We also have the owner of the consulting company here. And number 4 is application to alter 170 Blenheim Drive in Rideau Rockcliffe, property designated under Part 5. We have a person in agreement, Mr. Peter Locke. Does anyone want to hold that? No one in the audience other than Mr. Locke? Where are you? Mr. Locke? Oh. If committee is willing to carry this and support the project as has been recommended by staff, you don't need to speak? Okay, thank you. So is that carried? Thank you. And that's it. So we'll go back to our held item, which is 455 Green Avenue for a presentation.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I don't think the committee wants a full presentation. I was thinking I would just go through and give a bit of a highlight as to what has changed since the previous round, and then if there's questions, I can answer them.
That's exactly what the committee's looking for. Thank you.
So, as you've seen, this is an application to alter 455 Green Avenue, a property located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. So, as you may remember, there was an earlier application for this property. It was supposed to be on the agenda of the June 26th Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting. It was withdrawn by the applicant at that meeting. However, the report was publicized and was on the agenda, and you may remember that staff were recommending refusal of the earlier application, whereas today we are recommending approval. So there were 3 main reasons that we were recommending refusal. The first was that the landscape plan didn't reflect the character of the district. The second was that the proposed alterations sort of were neither here nor there. They didn't reflect the low-density built form of the village or the Main Street character along Beechwood. And then thirdly, that the material palette and massing of the building was too complicated, didn't reflect the character of the HCD. So the application before you today, just as a reminder, it's located at the corner of Green and Beechwood, right at the edge of the Heritage District. Beechwood is the boundary of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage District. Green Avenue is a short street with a somewhat different character to the rest of the district. A couple of photos just to remind you of what the building looks like. Constructed in 1950, assigned very little value through the recent evaluation of the buildings within the district. Very green, but somewhat overgrown. This is looking north on Green from Beechwood. The property is on the right-hand side of the photo. You can't see it because it's very treed. Same thing. This is looking across the street towards the property across Beechwood. Again, you can see the big fence and the retaining wall and all the green. So I'm just going to skip forward to the new plans. So this is the site plan. It is essentially very similar to the previous site plan in terms of the footprint of the building. So the footprint of the building is still increasing by a significant amount. However, the structure of the building and the massing and the materials have changed. So I'll quickly go through the elevations. This is the east elevation facing Beechwood Avenue. So as you can see, it's got a hipped roof with sort of a partial third story. It's clad in stucco and brick and some wood siding, so all natural materials. This is the west elevation, so this is facing up the street on Green. Again, still has 4 parking spaces. We requested that the applicant reduce the parking spaces to the minimum amount that they could in order to minimize the impact on the neighborhood. And we asked them to remove the garage doors, which is sort of contrary to what if you read the comments of the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association, contrary to what they've said. But staff felt that the removal of the garage doors sort of reduced the weight of the building a little bit and created a bit more open space. As you'll see in the upcoming landscape plan, the cedar hedge along the west property line has also been retained, so that will help to buffer the property from the neighbor. This is the south elevation along Green. As you can see, again, the material palette has been simplified using primarily natural materials now and not as many materials as were proposed before. And then this is the north side, so this is facing the neighbor along Beechwood. So the landscape plan was truly the main issue, and I'm sorry that my slide looks like that. It doesn't look like that on my screen, but anyway. The main changes to the landscape plan are that the hedge at the rear property line is being retained. This is a fairly mature hedge. It does need some maintenance, obviously, from the photos I showed you at the beginning, but it does provide a very good buffer to the neighbor on this side of the property. There are 2 trees proposed for removal here, which is where the driveway is going to be located. The proposed treatment for the driveway is no longer asphalt. It's proposed to be a turf block, which is meant to mitigate the impact of the additional hard surfacing on the property. The existing sumac tree at this corner of the property will be retained, whereas it was originally proposed for removal. The existing cedar hedge along the front of the property is proposed for removal, but it is proposed to be replanted with new white cedars. As you saw from the photos, it is quite overgrown and not in great shape. Staff are supportive of the idea of replanting. The applicant has hired a landscape architect, James Lennox, so this landscape plan has been prepared with that in mind. And then a new proposed deciduous tree here on the front lawn to mitigate the impact of the loss of these 2 trees. The existing hedge along this side of the property will also be retained, along with the several mature trees that are along the property. The original landscape plan showed a sort of very hard-surfaced semicircular walkway along the front of the building. This has been replaced with a more field stone, sort of stepping stone kind of walkway, which is more in keeping with the informal character of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. And then in addition, the existing wooden retaining wall, the railway tie retaining wall that is currently along Beechwood and Green is proposed for removal. It's not necessary. And the existing fence is proposed for removal, and the proposed cedars will help to buffer the property from Beechwood. Just show you a couple of renderings of how the property might look. So you can see here, this is the hedge that is in existence right now, along with the mature trees. 2 of the trees that are being removed are located in this area here. And this is a rendering along Beechwood, so showing the removal of the fence. The property does make a better contribution to Beechwood in this state than it currently does, which is a big fence and a lot of overgrown hedges. So the recommendation of staff in this instance, now that the applicant has refined the landscape plan and simplified the design of the building, is to approve the application to alter and to approve the proposed landscape plan. I'll just quickly flip through this. The property is located in a transition zone. The denser development is compatible with the character of Beechwood and provides an appropriate edge. The use of the simplified palette of natural materials is compatible with the materials found throughout the district. And then in terms of landscape, as I said earlier, the existing landscape is in need of maintenance, but its informal character is in keeping with the character of the district. The landscape plan preserves most of the mature vegetation and maintains the informal character. and the turf block will mitigate some of the loss of green space. The CHIS states that while not in exact conformity with the guidelines for the Rockcliffe Park Heritage District, that it is appropriate to the character and doesn't threaten the character of the district. Heritage Ottawa was notified of the application, and their comments, I believe, have been submitted to you as part of a letter on all the applications today. They are still in opposition to the application given the increased footprint of the building, and have stated that until the footprint is reduced in size that they are not in support. Neighbors within 30 meters of the property were notified, as is our standard practice. We did not receive any comments. I don't believe that the committee coordinator received anything either. The applicant has submitted, I believe, some comments resulting from their consultation with the neighbors to the committee. And then finally, the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association was notified of the application and has submitted comments that they are still not in support of the project. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions if the committee has them.
That was a good presentation. Thank you. Vice Chair Badalski, please.
Leslie, just a question. I noticed that this application doesn't, or the documents don't include the Heritage Survey Evaluation Form. Is that because it has not been evaluated, and so in our documents we don't have that?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, the building has been evaluated. Our general practice has been, and this can change obviously if the committee wants to see that information, is to include the survey form when the building is of some significance. This building received a very, very low score, something like 15 out of 100. So I likely have a copy of it here in my file if the committee is interested in seeing it, and in the future, if the committee wishes to have that included in all reports, we can include it.
Yeah, I think if I could ask that from here on in, it should be included in all the reports, and it's more geared towards helping the public understand how the Heritage staff come to their recommendations. I think that it's been sporadic in that some, two of the applications here do have the survey forms, and at least one doesn't. And I think that it really should help to educate the public to provide all the documentation that was used in coming up with the recommendations. And the other thing that could be also added is a comment on how the survey categories are arrived at. And I know that you're heading towards this in the Heritage Conservation Plan, but I think it would also help the committee and others, the applicants and the public, to get an idea of how to assess the recommendations and how the staff does that.
I would just make one comment to that, and that is that in Rockcliffe Park there are no categories at this point in time. And to be honest, moving forward, we are looking at ways of moving away from this category 1 through 4 and moving more towards a contributing, not contributing approach. So a building contributes to the district or it doesn't, rather than its level of contribution being 1, 2, and 3. And the other issue, I guess, I mean, we can provide that comment, but it does differ by the Heritage District, because in some districts the history is weighted more than the architecture, or it's weighted less because, for instance, in Lower Town, the history of the individual person who lived in the house is not weighted as heavily as it might be in Centertown or Sandy Hill, because they were workers' houses and everybody was a worker. So their history would all be this, pretty much the same. So it does differ based on the district, but we can endeavor to provide additional information as to the rationale for the evaluation of the buildings. But as you can imagine, many of these were done a very long time ago, and sometimes that rationale of how the categories were arrived at is not readily available, but we will try.
Anything else? Anyone else? So as I told you, the owner, Mr. Abouchar, you're here again. Thank you. And you say that unless we have questions for you, you don't need to speak. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Abouchar? I wanted to, I see none. I wanted to thank you for listening and for coming back to our staff with a better plan that allowed them to support it. So on the application, is that approved? Carried? Thank you very much. Are there any notices of motion? No? Any inquiries? No? Other business? Our next meeting is, we're not meeting in September. We're hopping over to, we only have a couple of items that can wait till the October meeting. So we're going to meet next on October the 9th, and so we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.